Welcome. My name is Matthew Hollist. I am the director here at the International Institute of Natural Wellness Education, found online at knowyourwellness.org. It is my privilege to join you today for this lecture on whole, nutrient-dense food. By proceeding, you affirm that you have read and agreed to the following terms. Whole, nutrient-dense food. Nutritional pioneer and physician Dr. Royal Lee back in 1951 had this to say, quote, "One of the biggest tragedies of human civilization is the precedence of chemical therapies over nutrition. It's the substitution of artificial therapy over natural, of poisons over food, in which we are feeding people poison, trying to correct the reaction of starvation." Dr. Lee was referring to, of course, the use of pharmaceutical poisons to correct the symptoms that are merely a result of a malnourished, properly fed body. So let's talk about these terms, whole, nutrient-dense foods. Whole food. The term whole food is so heavily marketed. It has no regulation of any kind. Anyone can really call anything they want whole food. So you cannot, I can't stress this enough, you cannot just buy a product that says whole food. So for our wellness purposes, then what are we meaning when we say whole foods? Well, I know this is going to be difficult for some of you to comprehend, but when I say whole food, I'm really just referring to food that is still whole. It looks like it did when it left the field. For example, vegetables look like they were just picked, preferably obtained locally, with a little good old-fashioned dirt still on them. Grains, nuts, seeds, beans, and legumes should remain whole and dried until you cook them, sprout them, or grind them. You should only grind them when you're getting ready to use them, and then we recommend you keep them in a sealed container in the freezer for best freshness. After grinding a grain or cutting or slicing a nut, it begins to oxidize and lose its potential nutrition right away. Okay, how about meat? Local, non-antibiotic, and hormone-free is a must, especially with chicken. Say that again, especially with chicken. Hormones and antibiotics, you have got to be out of there if you're talking about a whole food. Eggs, local chicken or duck eggs, preferably clean unwashed. In a clean environment, when a chicken lays an egg, it has a clear membrane on the outside that prevents microbial infection, and it's the healthiest way to have eggs, and then you wash them right before you crack them and use them. But of course you have to find a local farmer to do that. Milk, almond rice, and or coconut. Raw goat's milk is sometimes acceptable, but please understand that the current society is the only society ever recorded in any history of this world that has drank milk beyond the stages of adolescence. So it is really ideal for your health to be using almond rice or coconut milk. You notice that it wasn't an accident, I did not include soy on that list. A whole other discussion we'll have on that at a later time. So, whole foods. In short, the fewest steps, miles, hands, companies between you and the production of your food will always improve the nutritional qualities. We have become dangerously disconnected from our food and its production. So, nutritionally dense or nutrient dense. Whole foods refers primarily to the way the food is handled and processed. Nutrient dense food, as it sounds, deals with the kind of food that we choose and its concentration of nutrients. One of the effects of the global agribusiness evolution over the past 50 years is that we have greatly reduced our food diversity. The expense of genetic research and development has dictated an enormous reduction in food staples. We have moved to a single variety mentality, meaning we only know one kind of potato, wheat, carrot, corn, onion, etc. Society has gained this false sense of diversity because food engineers have developed thousands of different crunches, shapes, flavors, options that all are using the same few refined ingredients. Things like refined enriched wheat, corn syrup, soybean oil, and artificial or chemical flavors. Our recommendation here is that if you have a 7-year-old or a child, if your child cannot tell you when you read them something off of an ingredient list, if they cannot tell you what it is and where it was grown, it doesn't count as a food. Further compounding the problem is the fact that people have not been properly educated to understand that each variety of a crop contains a different nutritional profile. Each of those profiles have coenzymes and cofactors that are key and crucial, specific to what your body needs. So if we are to reach wellness, we have to intentionally diversify our diets. Write the phrase down: intentionally diversify your diet. Foods versus wellness. This is one of my favorite parts of this lecture. Is our food system really affecting our wellness, or is it just hype? The internet's full of hype. So I am sure there are those out there that would gladly say that this is just another hype scenario. Let's look for a moment at the U.S. obesity trends. I'm just going to flip through these a little. We look at 1985. We're seeing 10 to 14% in some areas. And then 1990, we start to see a lot more, and we see almost all of them coming into color. 1995, wow, there went all below 10%. As we jump up to the year 2000, now we only have one state left that doesn't have more than 15. 2005, wow, where did all those 15 to 20% of adults obese go? And it just keeps going on. Here we are at 2010. Now, many of you can remember 1985. We're not talking about, 100 years here. We're talking about essentially a generation, 25 years, which is in some cases what we would call a generation. So from 1985 to 2010, let's look at those. In 1985, the 8 worst states had 10 to 14% obesity. In 2000, there wasn't any states that were less than 10%. There wasn't any states that had 10 to 14%, or 15 to 19, or there was 14 states that had 20 to 24%. Now, 20%, that's 1 out of 5. Yet 23 states had a quarter of their state population or more considered clinically obese, and 13 states had 30 or more percent of their adult population obese. Now, here we are just 2 years later. They totally redid the color scheme because they were moving through colors so quickly. As we do this recording, it's 2014, so this is 2-year-old data, but it's the earliest we can get from the CDC. So let's look at the difference in just 2010 to 2012. We lost the 4 states that had less than a quarter where we lost, so we ended up down at 10 states that had less than a quarter. However, if you look a little closer at the statistics, in 2012, of those 10, 7 of those had only 2 points away from having a quarter of their population obese. Now, even though it was nice to see that in that 2 years we didn't bump over the 35% obese mark, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and West Virginia were all only 2% away. And anyone who has visited those wonderful states will agree with me when I say I am confident in the last 2 years that Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and West Virginia have fried, baked, and boiled enough things to push that obesity up over that 35%. Now, of course, this is supposition on my part. I cannot say until those CDC numbers come out, but I can tell you that the trend of obesity is, to say it is alarming, is laughable. We've never seen anything like it. Now, this brings us to an interesting social thing that we are seeing in our society today. what's called fat activism. Now, I want to be clear that the term fat is not my term. That is the term they have chosen because they are, one of the things that they perpetuate is that obesity is a medical term, and they do not like obesity because it's a medical term. And a large part of their activist movement is to educate people in this, what I would say, very false idea that obesity or fat is the way you were born. It is as an ascribed status, skin color, ethnicity. It is something that you cannot change. You may lose weight a little, but it'll come right back. And so really what we need to do as society is size acceptance. Now, fat activists have gotten some things right by trying to remove any negative connotations from obesity, but they also risk putting the blinders on an unhealthy condition that becomes normalized, accepted, and untreated. It's what we refer to as the shifting baseline. Because things become common, people begin to falsely believe that they are normal. So I need you each to be very clear on the difference between common and normal. A balance must be struck between allowing currently obese people to live lives unburdened by prejudice and stigma, something we support here at the Institute, of course, and we also, though, want to find that balance of being able to promote the aim of obesity treatment and especially prevention. The smoking industry famously denied the health risks of smoking, despite masses of evidence and medical consensus. This is now regarded as a moral abomination. Now, despite much medical consensus on the harms of obesity, a growing group of people are downplaying the harms, promoting size acceptance, and discouraging obese people from attempting to lose weight. Stigma is one thing, but it's misguided to prevent others from having the chance at better health. Now, why is this happening? Very clearly. Anyone who is questioning and thinks this couldn't be happening, go and spend a few minutes online and look at any large national or federal, or state for that matter, recent political campaign. Go back 15 years, 20 years, and notice the enormous amounts of contributions that depend, regardless of partisan affiliation, enormous amounts of campaign dollars that are coming from agribusiness front companies. And you'll see that this is why we are having such a difficult time finding the facts about obesity. It is in preparation for this lecture, I spent an enormous amount of time researching to find facts, current facts for the effect of obesity in America. Reality is no one wants to say because of the billions of dollars spent in campaign financing to ensure that, and it's the ironic thing is I referred to the tobacco industry. It's those same lobby firms that now represent the food industries, and they have done an just really scary job at making it next to impossible for anyone to speak out in a large sense against processed foods and other pre-prepared things that are affecting us. So, what I was able to find for you today comes from the World Health Organization, so thank goodness that they do not have the same national and state affiliations, and it is fact sheet number 311. Not as much information as I would like, but I can feel confident that it isn't hearsay, it is absolute fact. Revised May 2014. At the time of this presentation, it was located at the following URL, but you can find it as facts sheet number 311. So let's go through those, if you will, with me. In 2008, 1.4 billion, I didn't mistype that, adults were overweight. 200 million men and 200 million women were obese. 500 million people. 500 million. Now, why is this a problem? Because the World Health Organization reports that 23% of cardiovascular disease, the leading cause of death in 2012, is a result of obesity. 44% of diabetes-related medical concerns are specifically obesity related. We're not talking just deaths. We're talking the amount of money spent in treatment of diabetes. We're talking about injuries, people going on disability, amputations, blindness, and all the other horrific effects of diabetes. 44%, 41% of certain cancers, including specifically breast cancer and colon cancer, were huge ones. Endometrial conditions and cancers, 41%. Is there anyone listening to this that cannot relate to having someone in one of these categories? They also listed another long list of things, including musculoskeletal disorders, osteoarthritis. Now, here was another set of really interesting information that they gave to us about children and the dangers, their recognized dangers in obese children. Premature death and disability. Obviously, that's a danger, as a parent, I can't imagine. But breathing difficulties, how common are respiratory distress in children nowadays? Yet is anyone, physician or otherwise, educating and being educated on the link between obesity and breathing difficulties? Increased risk of fracture, really staggering higher numbers than we used to see 20 or 30 years ago in children that are having bone fractures. Hypertension. Early markers of cardiovascular disease, insulin resistance. I would venture to say that many of you remember a time when type 2 diabetes was not such a thing, because it was always referred to as adult onset diabetes. We never dreamed that we would have children or even infants that would have insulin resistance. And perhaps one of the most scary of all these lists, last and definitely not the least, is psychological effects. I very firmly believe that we have undergone one of the greatest social experiments ever allowed, and that is the high medication for psychological conditions of our children. And I'll tell you, there is not a researcher, does not matter how many double-blind placebo-controlled studies they have done, there has never been one that I have ever interviewed that has been able to answer me a simple question of how do we know when we take a large population of children and we put them on drugs and poisons that force a chemical reaction in their endocrine system. How do we know that if they are on those drugs during those crucial years of adolescence and puberty, in which traditionally your body learned to regulate its endocrine hormones, what is going to happen to those children when they are 30 and 40? Will their body ever truly be able to balance their endocrine system? And no one is asking that question and has, as of yet, not been able to answer it to my satisfaction. So when we're talking about obesity linking to these, just if it was only these, now there's actually a very long list, but if it was just these, it would be worth picketing in the streets. The face of obesity. Fat activists would have you think that it's acceptance and would have images of Martin Luther King saying he has a dream when people are not discriminated against, and though we applaud their ideals for no discrimination, you need to understand the face of obesity is 3.4 million adults dead each year, leaving behind broken families with countless others suffering. This, before you, is the face of obesity. The complex issue of obesity has at its core nutritional depletion in our modern food system. This is why fat activists are able to say that it's just the way people are, because so many people have tried a fattish diet that they got on the, quote, roller coaster of their diet and they lost a bunch of weight and gained it right back. Because it was just that, it was a fad, something that forced their body to lose some weight, but never addressed this complex issue of their body itself is not receiving its nutrients. It's not just about consumption and self-control issues as is falsely perpetuated. It's the mass consumption of nutritionally void foods that do nothing to nourish our cells and tissue and leave our bodies crying out for more. We have lived through the cheap food revolution. 50, 60 years ago, the poster on the left in which we educated people and encouraged people as a society, as a government, to grow their own nutritionally dense foods, to share seeds, to diversify their diet, to store and can them so that they were constantly nourished. And in just a short time of no more than 2 generations, the large billion and trillion dollar agribusiness companies have realized the amount of money in pre-processed foods. And that is how we have lived through the cheap food revolution. What do I mean when I say cheap food revolution? I mean this: healthy, fresh, local produced organic foods are not expensive. Hear that very clearly. Let me say it again. Healthy, fresh, locally produced organic foods are not expensive. We falsely believe this because the U.S. has increased taxes and increased government subsidies programs that pay for cheap food. The staples that I talked about, the corn, the wheat, the soy. So we pay for that with our taxes. And in this way, we have a false sense of our food costs. But healthy food is not expensive. We are just accustomed to eating cheap, fake food. People spend far less on food and far more on entertainment than in any time in any society. So to start these things of our steps, we're going to go through the steps that you need to start. And that first one is the changing of your mindset. That's our first step that we're going to talk about. Your first step in this transition to a nutrient-dense whole food diet is to understand that you have to pay for your wellness. You can pay with your money and purchase this real food, or you can pay with your time and grow it and eat that nutritionally dense whole food that way, or you can do nothing and you can pay for it with sickness. You will pay for it. 3 ways that I'm aware of. Could be more, but that's the ones I'm aware of. Are you growing your own? If you are, we recommend working with Seed Savers Exchange. In my opinion, the greatest resource for heirloom seeds that we have in this country and internationally. Adopt a farmer. Get it locally. Where are your farmers markets? Find that out. Sit down right now, pause this video, go research and find out where your farmers markets are. Decide now where you are going to shop for your nutritionally dense whole foods. Avoid the big box stores with irradiated, globally shipped produce. So that first step, changing your mindset and realizing that whole nutrient-dense food is not expensive. It is well worth the investment. Make the changes. Shift out of the amount of money that we spend on entertainment and other areas of our life. And make this your priority. The second step in your path, that as you're working on your path to having whole nutrient-dense food, that second step, become obsessed with diversity. Try dozens of new recipes, variations of vegetables, and so on. Learn to sprout, juice, dehydrate, blend, and prepare all kinds of meals. We have an enormous amount of resources at knowyourwellness.org, videos, recipes, and other things. Try them. Find out what ones you like. Keep an ingredient journal. This is very different than the common eating recommendations where people will have you keep an eating or a food journal. We are not asking you to keep a food journal. We're asking you to keep an ingredient journal. I already spent a little bit of a time outlining why this is such an important piece, why you would want to keep a food or an ingredient journal over a food journal. Reason being is that I want you to see exactly what you're eating, not the outcome, but the actual ingredients. So in that food journal, you only enter an ingredient a single time. So if I had something with wheat in it today on my food journal, it would say wheat. If I eat something with wheat again, I don't put it on again because I already have wheat. I'm just making a list of ingredients of the day. Now, there's a second little box that is the amount of other ingredients that aren't real food. So you're only listing the base ingredients like wheat, not wheat flour, enriched wheat, whole wheat, refined wheat. You're just listing wheat, carrots, potatoes, milk, rice, so on and so forth. If a child, as you heard me say before, cannot tell you what it looks like or where it was grown, it doesn't count as real food, therefore you just count it. So real easy, you're eating something you didn't prepare, which is a whole other topic, but you flip the box over, you look at the ingredients, you notice the things that are real food, you write them on your list, and you count the rest. And you put down that number. And at the end of the day, you'll have a list of really what you ate, the actual ingredients, and a number of how many fake ingredients went into your body. Build a great collection of healthy recipes. As I mentioned, knowyourwellness.org is a huge resource, and then share your recipes. Share them with us. We will post them so other people can freely access them. Share them with your friends on Facebook. Share the style of healthy eating. That's intentionally diversifying your diet. So you've changed your mindset. You're now intentionally diversifying your diet. Now you're going to add real food. Actually, let's go through a few tools to assess first. The third step in our little path here. With the assistance of your holistic wellness coach, for those that don't have a holistic wellness coach, please visit knowyourwellness.org to sign up so that you have a holistic wellness coach to walk this path with you. So with the help of your holistic wellness coach, you're going to find a few useful tools. Select them here. So what I'm listing here is not a set, but rather just to give you an idea, a few of them so that you can understand what I'm talking about and start changing habits. Here's just a few ideas. Crowd out the bad food choices. Common mistake in changing your diet, a really, really, really common mistake, is to remove all the foods that that you decide aren't serving you, and the person ends up starving. Because if you take a traditional, what we would call a standard American diet, or a SAD diet, SAD, standard American diet, if you take that diet and you remove all the things that are not nourishing your body, what you will be left with is very, 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 very little. This results in hungry, unhappy people that do not stick with it. It does not affect their life. They do not get better. And the next time somebody brings up eating healthy as a way to improve their wellness, they say, oh, I tried it, it didn't work. Well, they didn't try it right. That's the problem. Here's another suggestion in that. 6 days on, 1 day off. This is one of the, I mentioned that here's a bunch of suggestions you can choose from. This one, I actually, with very little exception, always, always, always put patients on. 6 days on, 1 day off. This will help them when they're giving up food to say, I can do it. This is my day. You need to decide what day, same day every week, and it's your guilt-free day. You can eat whatever you want. So if there's something you're giving up that is really difficult for you, you only have to give it up for 6 days. You can have it on that day, be it Friday is my guilt-free day or whatever you choose, but it just has to be the same every week. Now, the other real reason that I do this is it helps as a teaching aid to help people see the difference between when they eat healthy and when they don't. So then they begin to want to eat healthy. Because I promise you, if people are eating really healthy and they're doing a 60-day, a 3-week, a 90-day, it doesn't matter. But if they're denying themselves of things that their habits have told them they love, at the end of that day 90, if it was a 90-day challenge, on day 91, they are binging on all the stuff they used to enjoy. Day 92, they don't feel so good, and day 93, they're used to being sick and back to normal. So, if you do 6 days on, 1 day off, you will start to see why it is you want to choose a whole nutrient-dense diet. Okay, start with protein. Another good suggestion. We strongly suggest 20 to 30 minutes, within that first 20 to 30 minutes of waking, you eat 20 to 30 grams of a whole plant-based protein shake or other whole good healthy protein. This helps balance the body system and set the body up for proper metabolism throughout the whole day. Something raw with every meal. This is a great way for people that are struggling with getting raw things into their diet. Start just having something raw with every meal. This is great. Kids can lock onto this, and they'll be the ones reminding you, what raw are we having with meal? Be it a carrot, a piece of fruit, some raw almonds, something raw with every meal. You decide at the store. Wow, this is a good suggestion. People often say, I just can't stop eating, ... You know, whatever their struggle is. Well, if it's the house, you've already lost the battle. You don't decide this when you're eating it at home. If, I had a lady who was struggling with her 12-year-old and just kept telling me how he won't stop eating soda and chips. And she wasn't understanding what I was trying to tell her until I finally asked her what kind of car he drove. And she looked at me with a dumbfounded look, and it took her a minute to realize that what I was saying was that if it's not there, they won't eat it. Why we would have regular salt and sea salt in our cupboard. But I see people do it all the time. Or they have olive oil, the healthy oil, and then they have a regular vegetable or canola oil. Or they have honey and sugar. Or fruit and a candy drawer. You've got to pick one. Get rid of the old salt and just buy real sea salt. Throw out the sugar and buy honey and agave nectar and stevia and just get some recipes and try it. You've got to make the choice between these. Otherwise, you're just metaphorically having your cake and eating it too. You got to be all in. You don't have healthy food and unhealthy food. Make the commitment. Donate your fake food ingredients. Your people tell me, well, I've got a lot of sugar, stored up. Great. Go donate it to a food bank and make somebody happy. Make yourself feel good. But most importantly, do that as a favor to your health, and your body will thank you for it. Get rid of the fake food and stop trying to live the healthy and unhealthy life. You can't have fresh fruit and a candy drawer, white flour and freshly ground flour. You've got to make a decision. So, tools to assist you. Now, adding in real food. You notice we haven't talked about removing. We haven't went through removing the unhealthy food, because you always first add in the good stuff. You crowd out the bad stuff. So find lists of recipes. Make a comprehensive list. Don't skip this step. I cannot tell you how many times people decide they're going to do it. They go buy a bunch of healthy food. They put it in their pantry. They get rid of their stuff. But they don't take time to sit down, make a list, make a meal plan, find the recipes, and have it planned out. So then life happens. Time is busy. They don't have time. They come home. They don't know what to do with all this stuff. And they end up going out to eat or just not using it. And pretty soon they say, oh, I just can't cook healthy. But they've never planned out in advance healthy meals to do the legwork. It isn't that healthy meals take long. They just take longer than fast food, and you have to plan ahead and put some beans in the crock pot and so on and so forth. So add in the good stuff, all organic or local, balanced proteins, carbs, and fats, or the zone diet as we talk often about on knowyourwellness.org. One raw meal a day is often a good thing for people to do. Something raw with every meal you heard me talk about, or 70-30. On a long term, that is often what I'll put people on, is a 70-30, meaning that 70% of their, at least 30% of their food is raw. 20 to 40 grams of protein in the morning, 80 to 100 grams of healthy plant-based protein throughout the day. Adding in all sorts of good stuff, fibers, vegetables, green smoothies, fresh vegetable juices. You can find this stuff. I promise you, if you will go out there and look for it, there's wealths of information, not just at knowyourwellness.org, but so many places where you can find the things that you need. Now, lastly, we reduce the fake foods. That's the last step here on step number 5. So we eliminate the fake foods. For most people, this is the scariest part of the process. Don't change it all at once. With your coach, make some decisions and stick with them. If you try to change them all at once or change something different every day, you will really upset your possibilities of having some success. So pick one thing or two things, make those changes while crowding out the good stuff and learning to replace it with things that you enjoy. Healthy cooking can be absolutely enjoyable. Some possible suggestions for things to eliminate. Food sensitivities they know of. I'm especially for you coaches that are sitting here in the lecture, you need to ask them what's food sensitivities, because oftentimes people know the things they're sensitive to. They just have never taken the time to get them out of their diet. Milk or all dairy is another one I often do. All meat or red meat are often removed. Refined sugars, artificial sweeteners, I cannot find a time when I don't suggest removing those. I don't ever remember having somebody that I didn't suggest that. Gluten is often, or leavening, leavened bread. That's a real good one when you're wanting to reduce the amount of carbohydrate consumption, because if you tell people they cannot have leavened bread, it leaves them with tortillas or pitas or unleavened bread, and it just reduces the consumption. White flours, restaurants, oh wow, could you be okay, removing those from your list? People fear the terms or titles vegan or vegetarian, which is why we more focus on what we're changing their diet rather than say those things that they might already have a preconceived stigma associated with. So lastly, we change your mindset. This is your path, so you change your mindset. You intentionally diversify your diet. You pick some tools with the help of your wellness coach, again at knowyourwellness.org. If you don't have a wellness coach, you pick some tools to assist you. You add in real food. You reduce and start to eliminate the fake food. And you remember that Thomas Jefferson had this to say. And I say this to give you courage, that it is your choice, your health, and you need to do this. He said, if people let government decide what food they eat and what medicine they take, their bodies will soon be in as sorry a state as are the souls of those who live under tyranny. So with that thought, let me echo those words by saying, this is not our responsibility. It's not your wellness coach's responsibility, your spouse's responsibility, your parents, your children, your friends, or your neighbors. You have to take the responsibility, and it is certainly not the responsibility of your government or the health organizations to tell you. You need to educate yourself. You need to learn how to thrive on whole, nutrient-dense foods. So in closing, thank you so much for your time. We invite you to visit us online at knowyourwellness.org. And as always, we remind you that wellness is your choice.